10 students in the Academy Department were safely launched into the academic year. A celebration was arranged for November 10th, Martin Luther's birthday, to be known as a Founders' Day for this new and struggling Augsburg. People from considerable distances accepted the invitation by Professor August Wenas, the founder and first president of Augsburg, and Professor J. Anderson, no relation, principal of the Academy, to attend the formal dedication ceremonies. At this 100th anniversary of the first Founders' Day on this November 10th, 1969, we are grateful that all of you have accepted our invitation to be here for this convocation. At this time, we're going to listen to the strings of the Augsburg College Orchestra playing the finale from incidental music to a piece commissioned 100th anniversary of that first Founders' Day. The reality of our centennial emphasis, namely continuity and change, could not be portrayed more dramatically than by the circumstances of this assembly. Believe it or not, continuity is remarkably evident. That first Founders' Day fell 4 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. This one at Augsburg falls as many years after the most significant civil rights legislation ever enacted in our nation. In both cases, the race most affected had to suffer and to wait far, far too long. That Founders' Day saw sturdy pioneers of a minority immigrant people who were carving out their destiny in the frontier wilderness of America, addressing with sincerity the deepest issues of their day. This one at Augsburg welcomes another pioneer whose courage and determination on the perilous frontier of political activity has brought her through an apprenticeship as a New York Assemblywoman to become the first black woman congressman. I have that right, that's the way she wants it, in the United States House of Representatives. There she embodies the same determination to carve out a rightful place for Negroes, for women, and for urban inhabitants in the total life of this nation. A far more difficult frontier, I submit, than any which our forefathers ever challenged. That Founders' Day 100 years ago featured educators, such as they were, speaking seriously of the task facing teachers and students in uncertain times. This one at Augsburg today features an educator as well, whose credentials include a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors from Brooklyn College, a Master of Arts from Columbia University, an honorary doctorate from Columbia Teachers College, and the Columbia Teachers College Medal for Distinguished Service, the highest honor that institution can award. Time alone curtails a recital of her professional experience as a teacher and administrator. That first Founders' Day included persons given to deep personal convictions which could make for strife and struggle. Before another year had passed, institutional infighting sent Professor Wenas and his students out of the academy and into the professor's attic for 2 years before moving to Minneapolis. This Founders' Day features a person who is not afraid of a scrap either. Fighting Shirley Chisholm is noted for her willingness to take on all comers. That Founders' Day in 1869 discussed such topics as the union of moral and the intellectual in education, and the influence upon the individual and society of our intellectual education. Today, the subject is the social revolution, which our distinguished speaker will discuss, and it has, as you see, an inherent connection with those topics a century ago. On November 10th, 1869, the assembly was held in the American Methodist Church in Marshall, the only place commodious enough for the occasion. On November 10th, 1969, our speaker is of Methodist persuasion. But change is more important at this point than continuity. And the changes we must contemplate and accept, not only at Augsburg, but in society at large, are uniquely personified in our speaker today, who is not a man, but a woman, not a white person, but a black leader, not a theologian, but a politician, not an obscure teacher, but a distinguished educator, not a timid individual, but an unabashed protagonist for the rights of disinherited millions to share in the so-called American dream. Augsburg College marks its bold stance toward change by welcoming to this platform on this first Founders' Day of its second century the Honorable Shirley Chisholm, United States Representative for New York. As Johnny Carson would say, would you welcome, please, Mrs. Shirley Chisholm.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor, for that wonderful introduction. I am very glad to have the opportunity to come on this campus this morning. I've had the opportunity in the past 11 months to be on about 40 different campuses. And indeed, I am in a position to know that there is a social revolution going on in this country. Other persons may have other terminology for it. But regardless of what we may term it, there's a great transformation going on in the American society. I think that we have to note all up and down the breadth and length of this land that there's much confusion. And people seem to be concerned as to the direction in which it is all going to end. But I think that what we have to recognize is that we can no longer talk about making the world safe for democracy. We can no longer speak about the concept of brotherhood when our actions do not belie the words which we utter from morning till night, 365 days a year. And somehow, somewhere along the line, so many things have begun to catch up with us. And the time has come when we no longer can be like scapegoats, when we no longer be like ostriches and hide our heads in the sand and believe that everything is just going to disappear under the rug. It is not going to happen. America is at the crisis. America is faced with some very bold, complex challenges today. But it's up to America to face the future undaunted and move forward. I believe that there's a social revolution in progress in this country. There has been a great deal of dialogue about the two primary aspects of it, politics and the Black Revolution. And this morning I would like to explore some of the deeper, less noticeable aspects, and perhaps examine some of those that are better known to us in a different context. I would like to start with a term that has become extremely popular in recent years. The ghetto, as a word and as a concept, permeates much of what this fledgling revolution is all about. And more than that, I think that it will shape the substance and the form that the revolution eventually takes. The term ghetto describes more than where a person lives. It also describes how he lives and why he lives that way. But historically, it has been applied fairly strictly to only Jews and Black Americans, and those sections of cities where they have been forced by economic, social, and legal pressures to live. That is, historically. As soon as one says ghetto in this country, we immediately think of Black people and rat and roach-infested, garbage-laden slums. Without doubt, that is the ghetto. But what most of us fail to realize is that it is only one of the many ghettos in which every American lives. Many of you will not want to agree with me, but it is true. The major determinant of the lifestyle and the place where one lives in any society or any culture is his social, legal, and economic status. These three factors, more than any other aspect of the individual, controls how and where he lives. Few, if any of us here this morning, enjoy exactly the same social status, nor do we come from exactly the same subculture of our society. And were we to tell the truth, few of us are satisfied with our lifestyles and our social positions, were we to tell the truth. And because our society is so concerned with the material aspects of living, most of us find it very easy to go on living in our own little insulated worlds without ever realizing that we are trapped, too often willingly trapped, in a ghetto. A ghetto that has the same profound and damaged psychological and spiritual effects that living in the black ghettos of America has on one. In my speaking engagements around this country, I'm often approached by white people who tell me that they have played golf at such and such a country club for so many years, and that they were so naive that it took the Kerner Commission report to make them realize that there were no Negro members in their club. Now, many of them are liars. They not only realized it, they actively opposed it. And other minority groups joining their little exclusive ghetto. Others of them are liars also, but liars in a different vein. They realized it, and they just didn't have the guts to confront those most responsible for it. Of course, a few of them might have been telling the truth. But whether they were lying or not, whether they were moral cowards or whether they were truly naive, they're all members of the subcultural ghetto that their country club represents. Closed in, walled off from the rest of the world, choosing to remain there complacently and quietly, bothering no one, rather than to incur the social and economic sanctions that are often the penalty for professing the concept of brotherhood. Explore with me briefly a ghetto which I have become quite familiar with. It is the educational ghetto. That is, the academic community. The academic community is a social subculture. And in my attempt to broaden the definition of ghetto, I am pointing this morning to social subcultures. Often, far too often, the professional educator views the rest of the world as composed of people who are more ignorant and in some strange way less human. And there are many reasons for this, but I want to suggest that most often it is because his viewpoints are shared by the majority of his colleagues that he continues to hold them even when he knows rationally and intelligently that he is wrong. He continues in his views because of possible social and economic sanctions. There is the fear that his colleagues will shun him, that his department head will pass over him for promotion or not give him a choice assignment that could be extremely important to his career. His actions and his thoughts then become internalized. And at that point, he no longer realizes that they're actions of volition on his part, and he begins to accept them as natural and normal human feelings. Of course, this is a gross oversimplification. I have made no mention of the fact that the early groundwork to support that kind of a reaction is most often laid in the very early years of his life, even before he leaves his family, or that almost every one of his adolescent and adult contacts, both social and professional, serve to reinforce and reward his actions. But the professional educator is not the only individual in the academic community who reacts that way. The educational ghetto has its own social stratas or sub-ghettos. At the upper echelons, there are boards of trustees and boards of education, college and public school administrators. Then there are PhDers and masters, teachers, teaching instructors, and interns. The lower or student echelon has upper and lower classmen. It also has student groups who align themselves according to interests, the socially, academically, athletically, or politically inclined. There are cultural cross ties, and no group is culturally pure. Yet, each group is a separate and distinct microcosmic ghetto that maintains its sanctions to prevent as much cross-contact as possible. The potential intellectuals frown on the athletes. The athletes talk about smashing or crushing the SDSers. The political activists look down on all of the others, and the socialites ignore everybody but themselves. What distinguishes them in terms of reaction is that they react to different stimuli, not that they react differently. I'm here this morning to tell it to you like it is, to get beneath the superficialities which is destroying our country. We have been so afraid to face the truth about ourselves. And even though you might be a little bit uncomfortable, don't be uncomfortable. Just listen and try to see if some of the things that I'm sharing with you this morning are not actually so, even though you might not want to verbalize them. The years that I have spent as a student and a professional educator have proven this to be an almost constant pattern. My contacts with the church and the business communities have shown me that the same syndrome, if that is what it is, exists. There are group distinctions held by and towards bishops, reverends, lay ministers or deacons, and the general congregation. And many of you already know this, but I'm willing to risk belaboring the point, because not only does it begin to outline the truly mammoth task that faces us, but it also serves to point out the direction in which we must move if we are Americans, if we are to be at all successful in combating the problem. And the concept of social distinctions and rankings is as erroneous and is insidiously harmful to the society and the individual as the social misconception of race. There are arguments that these are natural divisions and feelings, and that no society or culture has ever been free of them. But even if they were natural, and no society has in fact been without them, I would still feel that they were inherently wrong and dysfunctional to the society that entertained them. There was once a time when it was thought that illness and old age were natural and somehow right. And now we spend millions of dollars to find cures for illnesses, prolong old age, and even we seek for immortality. And the philosopher Seneca has said, quote, "Men do not care how nobly they live, but only how long. Although it is within the reach of every man to live nobly, but within no one's power to live long." He might have been talking about our century and our country. We use the social barriers in much the same way that we use the artificial barriers of race to prevent our coming face to face with our own deficiencies as human beings. We hide our common humanity from others, but all too often we end up hiding from ourselves also. And when we reach the point where we are out of touch with our own basic feelings, we are in trouble, deep trouble. And America is just now beginning to find out how deep and how final that trouble might become. Because as a nation, we are generally out of touch with our own individual beings and our feelings. Political and social soothsayers are uttering proclamations of doom. And the situation throughout this country is not good. Racism, polarization, credibility gap, ultra-conservatives, left-wing, radicals, pigs, militants, hippies, yippies, all jargon and terms that describe the gaps and the crevices that are opening between us in America. The prognosis doesn't seem very hopeful. And modern man, just as 18th century and medieval man before him, has a frightening way of hiding from himself the significance of the actions of both his predecessors and his contemporaries through the coinage of descriptive but limiting labels. It has been said that contemporary history writes itself in nouns, names of violence and disaster, of guilt, betrayal, spiritual exhaustion. And with our lives threatened constantly by the specter of nuclear or chemical and biological warfare, the present social revolution being enraged in the daily grind of staying ahead of the Joneses, it becomes increasingly hard to find even a small ray of hope. There's such a ray, though. It is small, to be sure, but it is there. And there has been much talk recently about our alienated youth, the hippies, the yippies, and the young black militants. In the 50s, in the 1950s, we identified Jack Kerouac, Carl Solomon, and their disciples with a phrase that was coined by Kerouac himself, the Beat Generation. In the 1920s, we easily and without much thought labeled another generation. We're always labeling. Labeling is very nice. Just as exiled and as alienated from many of the common goals of the society as the lost generation. That was the generation that gave us Fitzgerald, Hemingway, and Eugene O'Neill. So the alienated youth, the Beat generation, and the lost generation all had or have a similar and a significant message for us. That message was and is about the nature of our actions towards our fellow man. It was and is about the nature of our actions towards ourselves and our own humanity. For over 20 years, I have been connected with youth, as a youth and as an educator. In the past 9 months, I've been on more than 40 college campuses. And I really want to tell you this morning that there are not that many alienated youth in this country. The vast majority of the youth in this country are, if anything, more committed to some of the basic goals of this country than the youth of my generation, and by many of the elders of this current society who are not about to change anything because they have been the beneficiaries of the status quo. And they're not about to practice brotherhood, but just mouth it. But intermixed with the old goals, they've set some new ones. There is a spirit that they bring with them. They've got a new way of talking, 'tis true, a new way of walking, and a new way of doing things. Because for many of them, and I'm telling you from experience because I travel, a lot of people are just in a insulated little situation and they don't know what's happening all over this country. For most of them, it is just not enough to make money. And therefore open the key and obtain the key to open the major door of acceptance by our society. Most of them have a commitment or at least an interest in equality that most of my generation did not and still does not really have. And many of those committed to social equality are going through a search that the majority of the older generation did not. A search for their own basic humanity. A humanity expressed in terms of their treatment and their understanding of their fellow man, as well as their treatment and their understanding of themselves, their families, and their friends. They're reaching out, touching other different people, other different cultures. But there is a depth of their feeling, their touching, that the infamous, ugly American lacked. They're not, for the most part, cultural dilettantes off on a vacation to the in spot so that they can bring home a few artifacts and some photographs to brag about to their friends. I hope to God that my obvious faith in young people won't make you think that I have completely written off the over 30 group, because I'm 45 myself. I haven't yet. Nor do I have faith in all of the younger generation. But by and large, change, if it comes, will be initiated, and it will come from the young. The forces of change, the movement toward freedom to exhibit the classic human qualities, gentleness with each other's feelings, thoughtful and constructive honesty with each other, will not be led by many of the older people of this country, my friends. The people of the older generation, for the most part, have too much of a stake in and too much of a desire for the material things of life. And the leadership must come, as it will, from the youth. We have attempted to denude, to foul, and to contaminate their legacy beyond recall. I hope that they may be able to save it and themselves. The majority of America's social activists are young and or middle class. And by social activists, I mean those that are involved in the ideological struggle in America. Few, if any, of the poor and the working, lower and middle class are involved at the ideological level. Many young revolutionaries are aware of this, just as they are aware that rhetoric is not revolution. But too often in this country that is dominated by Madison Avenue and the mass media, we find that slogans and catchphrases obscure the facts. The America of politically, socially, and economically disenfranchised minority groups' most pressing problem is how to most adequately make the largest possible numbers of people, at least economically, a part of this country. And perhaps I should take a minute to clarify what I mean by a social revolution. Because so often nowadays when you speak with people, you think that you're on the same wavelength. You're not on the same wavelength because their definitions of certain terms so often do not coincide with the other person's definition. So let me tell you what I mean when I say social revolution, so that all kinds of things don't begin to be conjured up in the minds of people. I'm talking about the basic reform of social institutions. I'm not talking about a guaranteed annual income per se, but I am talking about fair and equitable economic shares for every man, woman, and child in America, regardless of race, creed, or color. I am talking about the basic right of everyone to share in the building of a better society than the one we have at present, and the right to receive fair and equitable payment for that contribution. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about social revolution. In short, a servant is worthy of his hire. I believe that at the bottom the ideals of democracy are sound, but I do not believe that those ideals have been practiced in America, except in terms of an elitist few. I wish I had time to elaborate on some of these things, but I want to provoke thought on your part. At least a part of the reason that America has drifted farther and farther away from those democratic ideals is because of the economic system that not only allows, but forces individuals and groups to seek political power to protect their own little interests. At least a part of what has forced this country to drift farther and farther away from democracy and toward republicanism is a political system that depends so much on Madison Avenue type sales appeal that the only wealthy, the influential, or maybe the very lucky can run for and win high political office. In case some of you don't know it, I'm not wealthy, nor have I been until recently very influential. And at the rate that I've been running my mouth around the country, I may not be that very long. But the time has come when every American, black or white, rich or poor, influential or not, must run his mouth. The time has come when all of us must state loudly and clearly what we stand for, what we believe, and why we believe it. No more hiding behind the mask and the skirts that have brought our nation to the position it is in today, where it is deteriorating at the very seams. More than that, we must fight for what we believe, as if our future, indeed our very lives, depended on it. They may very well be so. And you will note that I have not spoken in conclusion about specific goals for the revolution, nor have I talked about specific ways in which this revolution will be waged. I have my reasons. At this stage in the struggle of America, it would be inconsistent for me to attempt to decide for the masses of people what course they should choose. It is far too early for me or for any individual to advance a single overall plan of action and say that this is the only one that is right. But there are a few things that I want to leave with you. Americans, black and white, must be forced to undergo a change of attitude, a change of political attitude, a change of economic attitude, and a change of social attitude. If indeed this country is going to survive, and if indeed we're going to continue to work to make America become what it should be, because indeed America has the potentials for becoming truly a real democracy in every sense of the word, we are going to have to attack vigorously racism, which is the bugaboo of America, which renders her Achilles heel, vulnerable to the attacks of her opponents, both inside of this country and outside of this country. We're going to have to stop engaging in a lot of jargon and begin to suit the action to the word. We're going to have to stop practicing Brotherhood Week once a year and practice Brotherhood 365 days a year so that we would know in America that everybody's committed body and soul to making this land the land of equal opportunity. Yes, we have indulged for so many years in jargon. And I myself for over 20 years have traveled up and down this land, going to all kinds of conferences, all kinds of meetings, sitting around the tables with my white brothers saying, let my people in just a little bit, because I foresee something on the horizon, that even when we have been able to accommodate, to compromise, to, if you will, stay in our place, because self-preservation is the first law of nature. Just let us in, just a little bit. Yes, for 21 years I was a moderate going all over, sitting down, trying to do things through the proper channels, using the proper procedures. Nobody paid any attention. Nobody. Came back to my community, told people, hold on, they'll come through. They laughed at me. 5, 6 years ago, something began to happen in America. When black people began to say, we're through with tokenism. We're through with gradualism. We're through with see how far you've comeism. We want our just share of the American pie now. And when we began to have the conflagrations, my friends, and the riots, I remember so well many white leaders came to me in my community. And they said, Shirley, please come out on the sound trucks and cool your people because we can't get them to listen to us. And I said to them, no, I will not come out on any sound trucks to cool anybody. I don't want to be killed. I have been trying to tell you in the proper way for so long what was going to happen. And now that you can't control the situation, you're going to make a martyr out of me? No, because I knew the moment that I went out on that sound truck, I would be stoned and killed, because many of my people had been laughing at me for many years when I'd been telling them to wait. This is what white America has done to black leadership like myself. Yes, I am a militant today. America made me become a militant. But lest anybody has the wrong idea, get Webster's dictionary and see the definition of militant. That's the kind of militant I am. All right? Make sure you do that. Because people will go out of here and say she's wild-eyed, she's radical, and everything else. In conclusion, my dear friends, I have lived through so much. And if I seem emotional, I know that you will understand, because someday America will know my life story. But in this revolution, the black people have been the most loyal citizens of this country. Even though we have been insulted, postponed, humiliated, and abused. And so many groups in this country have come to us as an ethnic group and have promised us greener pasture, certain kinds of ideologies. And yet we as an ethnic group, we have never succumbed. Some of us as individuals have succumbed to different ideologies. But we as a group have never succumbed. Do you know why we haven't succumbed? Believe it or not, we love America. But we measure America not by her achievements, but by her potential for what she can become to all of us. Our frustration level has been reached. And many of us can't go on much longer hanging on. And when we erupt, my friends, We don't erupt for momentary exercise. We erupt as a result of years of insult, humiliation, and abuse. We do not curse imaginary practices, my friends. We do not curse imaginary procedures, my friends. Think. Try to understand. Although you are white, you're not black. But see if momentarily you can become black and understand the anger and the frustrations that have welled within our bosoms for ever so long. We're not about to destroy America. We just want America to wake up. And just as every other ethnic group has come to this land, landed on the shores of this nation, hardly able to speak the English language, but coming in because something on the foot of the Statue of Liberty said, "Give me your tired bodies." Yes, and they came, they streamed in. Went to school at night, went to college, acquired certain skills, and pretty soon they became assimilated in the American culture, moved on out and up into the middle class of American society. They had found their dream. We came shackled at the arms and the wrist, and the blood, sweat, and tears of our forefathers rooted deeply in the soil of this country, making Wall Street the great financial center that it is today. And yet, because of an almost unsurmountable barrier, skin color, we couldn't begin to think like these others that came over, that we could ever realize the American dream, my friends. And now the nerve of us is some people are saying, "What do you want, Shirley? Your people are coming along. What do you want now?" And I say, I want just what every other group has wanted and has been able to get in America. That's all I want. Nothing more, nothing less. But you see, when we had the conflagrations and the riots a few years ago, America became panicky. There was no need for this panic because there were groanings and grumblings, my friends, for such a long time that indicated that all was not well. But you know what happened? For the first time, many persons in white America, their front doorstep was right in the midst of the struggle. And their own safety was threatened. If it had not been threatened, the black brother would have gone on groveling and groaning. But it was threatened. So everybody became excited. My friends, hastily called conferences and jargon is of no use any longer. There are enough surveys, graphs, studies, analyses packed up on the shelves of all kinds of agencies of this nation about the problem. We don't need to waste the taxpayers' money in collecting materials any longer. First of all, you have to come to the conclusion yourselves that you believe in the brotherhood of man. If you don't believe in the brotherhood of man, well, then forget it. If you call yourselves Christians and go to church on Sundays and just relieve yourselves and do not practice brotherhood, Christianity the rest of the week, you are not a Christian. Come on, let's get with it. Let's get together and make America what it should be so that Dr. Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, the civil rights fighters who have given their lives for this cause, and the Kennedy brothers, so that the lives of these young men and young women, having the courage to fight, their lives would not have been in vain. Reassess your values. Reassess your humanity. America will be all right again. She's come through before. She's going to be all right. I know she will. But you've got to have courage. You've got to realize that if you're going to have courage in this social revolution, that you will be abused from time to time. That people will say things about you. If you're white, and you live in a white community, and you keep having black people coming to visit you and what have you, be prepared for what the people in the community are going to say about you, and vice versa. But that is the test, that's the challenge if you believe in the brotherhood of man. You see, not practicing it once a week when you have your little conferences once a year, Brotherhood Week, and then the rest of the year forget about it. You're willing to accept that challenge because you know one thing. You don't look to man for approval. You look only to God and to your conscience for approval of your actions. That's the difference. In conclusion, the time has come when we can be no longer the passive recipients of whatever the politics or the morals of a nation may decree for us as a country if we are indeed to survive, but that we shall rise up, have guts, have courage, speak our best words, think our best thoughts for all humanity, do our best deeds, looking only to God and to your conscience for approval. I thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. I've got one question because I'm going to take the time to give you an opportunity to hear how Shirley Chisholm took on one institution that she knows needs a lot of changing, how she took on the Congress of the United States. Will you tell us about that?
My dear friends, in this life, in spite of the struggles and difficulties, one has got to really have a sense of humor if you're going to survive. And thank God I do have that sense of humor. When I got to Washington, my reputation had preceded me because I had served 4 years in the New York State Legislature. And it was known and recognized that I was a fighter, that I never looked for people to come along with me if I believe in something strongly enough. So often throughout my life so far, I have been a loner. But I don't mind being a loner because when I just said to you that I look to God and to my conscience for approval, I do. I don't look to man. I don't care what man says or thinks of me. I have a special communion with God. And so when I went to the Congress, they wanted to indicate to me quite clearly that you're not going to come down here and upset things the way you did in the New York State Legislature. But of course, they're not going to say that to you. They're going to do it by action. So they'd ask us for a list of the committees that we would be interested in being a part of. And I thought, gee, it would be wonderful to be on the Education and Labor Committee because I have 3 degrees in that field. I've been a teacher, a director, the state legislature. I was the sub-chairman of the Education Committee, conducted public hearings. My whole life has been in the area of education, so I took that. No, they didn't put me on that. I took banking. And the only reason I took banking because the subcommittee on housing was a part of the banking committee. They didn't give me that either. Everything that I was interested in, they refused to give me. So one day, they called me in, and they said, Mrs. Chisholm, we have your committee assignment, and my committee assignment was the subcommittee of forestry. The subcommittee of forestry on the agriculture committee. Now, my dear friends, had I been given consumer problems or the migrant farmer, because 90% of the migrant farm workers in this country are blacks and Mexican, Spanish-speaking Americans, had I been given that, even though I don't have farmers in my district, I would have accepted that because so many black people are migrant farmers. But to put me on forestry? Well, of course, I got the message. And immediately I became perturbed, and I began to talk to some of the congressmen And I told him, look, I can't go along with this. This is ludicrous. Shirley, we know it's no good, but you keep quiet. You don't upset things. You just take it and do what you can with it. Well, it bothered me. So I decided to call the speaker. And I called the old speaker and I spoke with him and I told him, no, I mean that. I spoke with him and I told him that I understood the system, but I really couldn't serve on that subcommittee. Just find some committee that has a little bit, just a little bit, Mr. Speaker, of relevancy to the needs of the constituency that I'm representing. He laughed. He said, Mrs. Chisholm, it's really funny. But I have no control over the system. Even though I'm the speaker, the committee on committees makes the assignments, and I have no control. So I said, well then, Mr. Speaker, what you must do, use the weight of your powerful office, to help me. And I know you'll try to help me. And he constantly indicated to me that he couldn't do anything. And friends, let me say this to you. I am this way. I am very open. You either like me or you dislike me. You accept me or you reject me. But what is on my heart and on my mind, I just blurt it out. And so I forgot for the moment I was talking to the old speaker. And I said to him, but Mr. Speaker, if you're not able to help me, I cannot accept this. This is ridiculous. I'll have to do my thing. He said, what? And I forgot for the moment that really I should not have used that terminology with him because he's not attuned to that kind of thing. So I explained to him, when one says do one's thing nowadays, it means that you feel so strongly about something, you go ahead and do it, and you're prepared to take the consequences. And all my life I've been this way. So he said, it was so interesting. Why must you make threats? Why must you intimidate? He said, wait a minute, I'll see what I can do. Had I not used those words, he wouldn't have done anything because it's the system. You understand what I'm saying? So therefore, he tried. He really tried, but he couldn't do anything. So I went to the Democratic caucus. When I went to the caucus, they're giving out the committee assignments now, and I approached about 8 congressmen, and I said, now look, I need moral support because I am going to get up in that caucus, and I'm not going to accept the assignment. And they warned me. They told me, you just don't do it, Shirley. You're committing political suicide. Well, I've been committing political suicide from the day I got into politics 4 years ago. I'm still here. So anyhow, when I went in, they gave me some. I got up, and I told them that it seemed that the House of Representatives only knew that a tree grows in Brooklyn. But the fact of the matter is that under no circumstances could I accept this assignment, and that I charged the committee with reconvening and within another month giving me an assignment that has a little bit more relevancy to the needs of my constituents. I didn't come here to upset your system because I know how hard it is to buck this system. But I came here to help to initiate change. How could you give me a forestry subcommittee assignment coming from an urban ghetto? It's ludicrous, ridiculous. Within a month, they changed it. But when I said that, the whole House, I don't know what it is in people. People don't have courage anymore. Oh, God, they don't. The whole House, when I got up and made this statement, the whole House said, oh, I thought that the heavens had opened. You see, and after I went out of that chamber, you know what really hurt? And then I'll stop. Do you know what really hurt me more than anything else? When I went out after, when I wanted the moral encouragement and the moral support from some of those gentlemen, they never came through. But when I went out after, they came up to me individually. Shirley, you've cut cuts. It was beautiful. Oh, I'd go along with you. And I said, where were you when I needed your help on the inside? This is what's wrong. People won't take a stand. So now, I am on the Veterans Affairs Committee. But at least there are more veterans in the district than forests.